Well, hello everybody. I'm Lisa Harker. I'm director of the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory, and welcome to this lunchtime talk with Pauline Wigglesworth, director of Blackpool Council's Health Determinants Research Collaboration. Pauline is passionate about research evidence, which of course we are also passionate about at the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory. But what is particularly special about Pauline is her commitment to balancing different types of evidence from academic research and data, with evidence from practitioners, and critically from lived experience. We've been very fortunate to be working with Pauline in Blackpool, where she helped secure funding to create one of the first health determinants research collaborations, which is enabling the council to become an evidence-based organisation. We've also been working together to find ways to better support parents who are at risk of having their babies taken into care. Now, Pauline is, as you're going to hear, very passionate about co-producing solutions to local problems with and for local people, and keeping people's lived experience front of mind when developing new services. So we're in for a great conversation today. We have lots of questions for Pauline, and some of those have been submitted in advance by our audience. So thank you to everyone who sent in a question beforehand. We do want to hear from you during the course of the conversation, though, so please use the chat tab to ask questions or make any comments. We're going to try and address as many of those as possible, but all of them will be read by the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory team, and that really helps us shape future events and research. If you find the chitter chat in the chat a bit distracting, you can disable it by unchecking Show Chat Preview in the chat tab and keeping the chat window closed. We're recording today's session, so if you want to listen to this discussion again, please visit the events section of our website, nuffieldfjo.org.uk, and you'll also find recordings of previous lunchtime talks there too. So welcome, Pauline, and your dog, I think.
I'm so sorry about that.
Quite all right. You're both very welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I wanted to start by asking you about why you feel so strongly about the need to balance all these different kinds of evidence.
Well, firstly, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me to chat this lunchtime. I love talking about all the things that we've learnt along the way, because we've had kind of a 10-year journey in Blackpool around developing our co-productive practice. And, you know, nothing brings me more joy than working with the community, the co-production community in Blackpool. And, you know, obviously today I'll be kind of talking in half. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to literally be one second.
Obviously, dog wanted to be part of today's conversation
Yes,
as well.
And that never happens, but there's a cat in the garden, so there we go. So the reason why I'm basically so passionate about working with these different types of evidence is really because when I came into this work when the first Head Start program started, it was a lottery funded program. There was a need to, one of the things that were fundamentals from the funder was to work co-productively. And I don't think, you know, I'm not embarrassed to say that when I kind of think of my practice at that point, my kind of toes curl in my shoes slightly, you know, when I think about that very early journey. But what that's enabled me to do as far as developing my own co-productive practice, and I think the practice in Blackpool, is to get to the point where I could not imagine not having these different forms of knowledge coming into the work that we're doing. And we really are doing some really important transformational work across the health and social care system. And so I suppose I would describe my journey as at the beginning thinking, oh, isn't this a nice thing to do? Aren't we great involving lots of people? To the point now, which is I couldn't imagine doing it without people with lived experience, without people who are experiencing the front line of the work, and without some really amazing academics in the mix together. And, you know, I've witnessed for myself the magic actually that happens when you bring people together and create a space, create the kind of atmosphere where people can work as equals. And that is, that for me is, that's what creates the magic. And that's really a joy for me to be able to kind of facilitate these kind of spaces. And also just very practically, the work that comes out of these, these projects, these co-production projects, it takes longer, but it sticks. We still got work, Blackpool Families Rock, kind of 4 years ago, still still in there, still important principles and still driving practice. So, it's really important work.
I wanted to ask you about Blackpool's Families Rock, to give us a bit of an insight into how you do this, because we often talk about listening to lived experience and co-production and the importance of balancing practice and research evidence, but the real gritty stuff is how to do it, the methodology. So give us a sense of how you approach it.
Yeah, so we've kind of refined a structure, a model for the way that we bring people together. And again, it's been very iterative, and we've learned along the way. But essentially, what we do is we're very clear about the purpose of the group. So a lot of the times that will be a group that comes around a specific problem, or it might be to design or to create something. We choose the experts that we need, that we know we're going to need to bring knowledge into this area. And so, and that's a key point of the process, is getting the right people around the table. But essentially, we usually meet for about 2 hours a week, every week. And it's usually anywhere between 10 and 12 weeks for an initial co-production project. And it's facilitated. So it's either myself or a member of a co-production team in Blackpool who facilitate the people to come together and go through a journey in a way that starts with research. Everybody's on an equal footing and researching together what is going to enable this problem to be solved, or this product to be created, and which then moves through, the focus moves through into what does that mean for Blackpool? How do we adapt what we've learned to the Blackpool context? And what kind of innovation, what solutions do we think might be able to help in this situation? So yeah, it's, you can never define the whole process, because the idea of co-production is it goes where it goes. But I think that structure holds the process. It's a bit like having boundaries, really important, so that people know that it's safe. Because actually there's a lot of really quite emotive discussions happen in that space, which are really important for people to be able to do.
And so talk a bit about Blackpool Families Rock. Where that came from, and what impact do you feel that's had?
Yeah, so it's been a while ago now, but we had an inadequate rating in Blackpool, and we had a commissioner in our children's social care supporting the work, and the DCS at the time. I was part of Head Start, and we were discussing and saying, really, we need to build from a culture of working in a respectful way with children, young people and families that isn't about process-driven social work. It's about relationships and human practice. And so we agreed to facilitate one of these groups to look at a set of principles of practice. And what came out of that was just such a joy to be part of. So we had young people, we had foster carers, social workers, our principal social worker was in there. And we all worked together. Other practitioners were in there as well. And we worked through a 10-week process. And what came out of that was the social pedagogy of head, heart and hands, and a series of statements that came underneath each of those, which were straight from the words of the group, about what we would probably now describe as trauma-informed, trauma-responsive work. But at the time, that wasn't a thing at the time. This was about this group saying, this is what's important to us. We can make mistakes. We are kind to each other. We understand the importance of honesty and all these kind of things that sound, that's kind of common sense, but actually are missing, or certainly were missing at that time in the system. And that's how Blackpool Families Rock was created.
And one of the questions that were sent in advance was about how, when you have no previous experience of co-production in an area, when you're starting out, how do you motivate parents to be part of the process? How did you do that in Blackpool?
Yeah. So that was actually one of the biggest things that we learnt, is that you can't manufacture a reason for parents to come into a co-production space, and it can't be decided by the system. Oh, well, we need to sort this out, and so we're going to bring parents in. What's really important is that actually that is something that parents feel passionate about. It's something they've experienced. It's something they don't want other parents to experience. This was the real altruism of parents and carers is, I don't want other people to go through what I've gone through. And if you can create a space where parents can trust you, that actually they are going to have an influence, that things, you'll have a senior sponsor. One of the things that we always have for our co-production groups is a senior decision maker who's sponsoring the work and who comes in and speaks to the group and reassures them that this is going to be considered at the highest levels. So if you can bring those things together, then that's, you're on a good footing. But of course, there aren't hundreds of parents out there who are all just ready to be in a co-productive space with academics and senior leaders. So there needs to be some, and we've got the Parents of the Revolution in Blackpool. That was started as a peer support area. And because the parents were so passionate about wanting change, they created a kind of spin-off, which was Take a Stand. And those parents who were ready to want to be in those spaces are then the ones that came into the co-production space. So it was kind of a real development journey for parents as well.
And when people were asking in advance about how you build trust, you've said a little bit there about the need to be honest, to ensure that from the very beginning it's clear that this process is going to be listened to, it's going to result in change. But in that 10-week program, you must have examples where trust is lost or things get a bit scary. What sort of things do you have to do to maintain trust through the 10-week program?
Yes, it's really brought my therapeutic group work skills to the forefront. This facilitation role. So for me, the most important thing is creating opportunities for people to get to know each other as people. So, there's a huge power dynamic in the room, and as facilitators, we need to do everything that's possible to dilute that power dynamic. So one of the things we did in Blackpool was create paid employment roles for people with lived experience, so that at least everybody was paid for their experience in those spaces, if they chose to. Didn't have to, but if they chose to, that's an option for them. But just the opportunity to build relationships, get to know each other as people, and co-produce a set of ways to engage the people, or things that are important to them through this journey. And for some people, language is incredibly important, the language that we use. For other people, it's about the actual ways that we work together. So yeah, there's all kinds of different things that are important to different people. And making sure that we have the opportunity to work in that way, agree that way of working, and then when things happen, which they do, it's then about how do we bring those principles into practice. So how are we compassionate to one another? You know, when you've got a social worker in the room and a mother or a father who's had a terrible experience of the social work system, as facilitators, that's about finding space to be able to be compassionate to each other's situations. And if you've done the relationship building at the beginning right, then that's a lot easier. But there's a lot of what we do about locating problems in the system, because everybody's trying to do the best they can in really difficult circumstances. And so, so locating problems in systems is really important as well.
And when you look at the impact that this has had, you talked about Head, Heart and Hands and the longevity of the impact of that work. You also mentioned Head Start, and that's working with young people around mental health. Are there things that sort of stand out to you as changes that have happened but that wouldn't have otherwise happened without this process?
Yeah, I mean, we've just had some great opportunities to make changes in Blackpool. So the Born into Care process really kind of comes to mind first, because that's been a 3-year journey. So we were really lucky to be working with Claire Mason, who's a researcher at Lancaster University, who herself is working co-productively with mothers and fathers as part of the national research into Born into Care, obviously alongside yourselves. So she came and supported us in Blackpool, and we started that journey with a mother's group and a father's group, and that was 3 years ago. And from there, the mother's group had a mixture of midwifery, social workers, obviously academics, and again for the father's group, because we knew the father's voices is very absent, and they co-produced a set of principles, and that has guided the work. And we've probably done about 10 other co-production processes since that time. And along the way, there's been lots of changes that have been made to the system. So, teams have been reformed. So there's now pre-birth teams, referral dates have been changed, lots of changes in the system. But the point we're at now is that there's a real focus around recurrency. So there's been an investment in what will be a recurrency offer for mothers and fathers, and that will be both post proceedings and also for families where there's pregnancy as well. And of course, we're also, a spin-off of that is looking at how a problem-solving baby court might be part of this system of supporting recurrency. We've got 76% of our mothers who have had older children taken into care. And even with all these changes we've made with Born into Care, we know that process, that court process, isn't right. And it's a missing piece of the jigsaw for us. So it's a really exciting piece of work to be thinking about what a problem-solving baby court could look like in Blackpool, and really to help to solidify and bring these changes together. So, and a lot of amazing people, both in and out of Blackpool, are supporting the process.
That's great. We're very excited to see how that develops. One of the questions we received in advance was about the main barriers you've come across in terms of landing evidence and both data research, practice evidence, and lived experience. Yeah. From your experience, what are the kind of critical elements to ensure that research is taken seriously and these sorts of initiatives have an impact and a long impact?
Yeah, so there's a real culture. Obviously, I work at the council. I'm talking from a local authority perspective. I work from Blackpool Council. I've worked in Blackpool Council for 18 years now, and I think there's an issue with demystifying the word research first and foremost, because I think there's a lot of narrative around research. It takes too long. It's never, it can never come and affect practice. All these things that we just need to get on with the doing. We haven't got time to be doing the navel gazing, all these kind of things that can come out. So there's something about demystifying that and understanding the value of research. And obviously, when you're bringing academics into discussions which are about practice and about systems, and people are experiencing the value that that has, then that's, you know, for me, one of the greatest ways to kind of be able to win people over about the importance. I know, and I've been in that position. You know, I was one of the people who needed to be won over kind of 10 years ago when we started Head Start. So I understand the process that some people need to go through around that. But I also think there's a massive challenge for us to be able to share really accessibly the value that you can get, the evidence that comes from research with people in ways that is meaningful for them, whether that's people who are in the community, whether that's people who are working on the front line, whether that's people who are commissioning. You know, for Blackpool, 2 billion, a cumulative figure of £2 billion has been taken out of our central budget. When you have those kind of, when you're up against that kind of funding landscape, people having the time to sit up and reflect and really consider evidence, that's a luxury, you know. And so our real challenge, especially for the HDRC, is to make that evidence as accessible as possible and as quickly as possible.
That makes a lot of sense to us here at the Nuffield FJO as well. Right, some questions coming in from the chat. So you've talked a lot about the process, and really the key thing that stands out is that you must be a fantastic facilitator. You must have to hold a room in quite difficult circumstances. You know, what sort of background do you have in terms of the skills that's needed for that? And are you looking to sort of spread those skills amongst, you know, the others in the team at Blackpool?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for your kind words. That's great. I never thought, I mean, I started my career working with in the adult substance misuse field, and I did a lot of work. I worked for 6 years in a therapeutic community, and I never thought that the skills that I learned in that therapeutic community would come in so useful, but they're incredibly important to me now because people are hurting, practitioners are hurting, community members are hurting, and that acknowledgement of that and that understanding of that is so incredibly important. So, you know, that start of my career has really done me a lot of favors as far as my facilitation is concerned. And I can't remember the second part of the question.
Well, how do you spread that?
How do I spread that? Yeah, so we've got the co-production team in Blackpool. So there's there's already people in that team who are in these spaces as well, and leading co-production spaces. So, you know, some of the work that we're doing, which is far more about kind of co-design, or they might be shorter projects, you know, the team are already getting on with. I think, you know, the thing that I've really learned about these spaces is just understanding what's needed from the facilitator and matching your facilitator to that space. So, for example, we did a wonderful piece of work with our place-based partnership, in our SEND partnership, around co-designing the strategy for the pathway to adulthood. And absolutely who we needed in that space was we've got a wonderful co-production lead called Sarah, and SEND is her background. And we absolutely had her in that space to do that. That made sense. So there's also a matching process that kind of goes on as well, I think, for each of these projects. And one of the things that I'm very aware of is, you know, just trying to find a way to create opportunities for other people to kind of come in and understand the kind of skills that are needed to facilitate and have an opportunity to practice that. So that's kind of the next step for us.
Now, I know on the chat people are curious as to how all this is funded, and particularly in the context of major spending cuts. How is your team funded? Where does that funding come from? Is it secure? You know, what's the sort of financial basis for investing in this type of work at a time when local authorities are really facing a lot of pressures?
Yes, yeah. Not easy for anyone, is it? But we were very lucky. We got a large funding pot from our place-based partnership. So the anchor institutions, what was the CCG at the time, obviously they've been subsumed into ICBs, but CCG funding alongside the council, alongside our foundation trust, so Hospital Trust and Mental Health Trust, co-funded and the project to start us off, the team to start us off. So that was really important. And then what happened is that people started to see the benefit of that. And obviously there's also requirements for people to work co-productively with, you know, with parents. So we also get funding now from our children's social care. We had funding from the SEND. We got funding from the SEND partnership. So yeah, it's a bit all out. It's a bit from different places for different pieces of work, which I'm sure our VCSFE, our colleagues who are listening in the VCSFE sector are probably much more well versed in than myself about, you know, about being able to pull funding in.
And what happens in terms of after a period of co-production, proposals are made, hopefully taken up? Do you have a role in seeing what happens next, and do you keep track of that, or is it a bit sort of ad hoc in terms of knowing whether some of the initiatives you're working on, what happens sort of down the line?
Yeah, I mean, we've been quite lucky in the sense that we've had leaders. We've actually had we've got some really brave senior leaders in Blackpool. That's the other thing that I'd say, who have made, you know, public statements to say, you know, kind of things like our children's social care systems are not working and we need to, you know, we're asking parents now to help us with this. We need, you know, we need your expertise to make this better. But generally what happens is that because you get senior leaders in these co-production spaces, that actually the work then continues, because when people experience co-production and feel the value of it, then it tends to continue. So that's what's happened in our children's social care. And again, in our SEND partnership, you know, with the strategy, that led to other pieces of work. And I think because we're able to support young people and parents and carers to come in and be their authentic selves in these spaces, that sells the work more than anything. So it tends to continue, not always, but it tends to continue. And so, for example, like I said, with the Born Into Care, that's been a 3-year journey, and continuing. So yeah.
It's really good to hear. Another question that popped up in the chat is about working across systems, how to support change that avoids working in silos. This must be a topic that you come up again and again. It's certainly one for Born Into Care, given that it relates to hospital stays as well as children's social care, as well as the family courts. Do you think this process of co-production is a step towards helping people see beyond their silos, and does it begin to have traction in that way?
Yeah, that's absolutely one of the things that most people feedback after these co-production processes. I had no idea about how the system worked in children's social care or in the hospital or in midwifery or you know, in the judiciary. So absolutely it is. And I think sometimes I kind of think about these spaces a bit like kind of social learning theory, that idea of communities of practice, where you're crossing the boundaries of different organizations and different disciplines, and that actually it's that crossing point that offers the greatest opportunity to learn. And so yes, absolutely. I mean, I can speak for myself. A massive learning that's come from being able to be part of these co-production processes, but certainly for people in the groups, when we get feedback, it's one of the main things that comes out, and just a genuine understanding of the difficulties and the opportunities that other people are facing in different organizations or different parts of the system. And that whole thing, Lisa, I know, you know, sometimes it's like you've got someone to pick a phone up to. That's the other thing that people will say. I know somebody now in midwifery, I can just pick the phone up, or vice versa. And that, we can't underestimate the power of those relationships and what that leads to outside and after the co-production work finishes.
Yeah, you're really building connections that hopefully will sustain. Finally, obviously we've seen quite a shift in the last decade in terms of the value given to lived experience in particular, and the increasing investment in piecing together these different kinds of evidence to affect change. where do you see things going next? What's the sort of new frontier? What should we be thinking about in terms of the next 10 years?
Yeah, so I think certainly from an HDRC perspective, from a research perspective, what we're going to be thinking about is, you know, what's the opportunity to have a structure and a theory about the way that we weave these different types of knowledge together. So when we're thinking about knowledge from lived experience, knowledge from practitioners, knowledge from academia, how do we actually find a way of weaving that together that we can share with others? Because I think when we talk about evidence, that's how we want to talk about evidence. But there's very little research that's done in this area. Wonderful work going on in Canada, by the way, with the Indigenous population. Wonderful work going on around poverty with ATD Global. They talk about merging different types of knowledge. But there really isn't a lot of theory or practice that goes along here. So for us in the HDRC, we want to be focusing about getting some really, some really accessible outputs out that's going to help people to think about how they do that, the value of it, and how you then can go on and do that in your own context, because this is how we do things in Blackpool. It will never be the same anywhere else. It's like this whole knowledge into action type work, isn't it? It's totally needs adapting to the local context. So for us, that's going to be a big part. And then the next step is, how does that affect decision making? Because really, the HDRC is all about affecting and addressing health inequalities. So how can we help decision makers to have this kind of evidence at their fingertips to make better decisions on behalf of their communities?
That's amazing. Thanks. It's been so inspiring. I'm afraid that is all we have time for, but thank you so much, Pauline. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And thank you to everybody for attending. If you'd like to find out more about Nuffield Family Justice Observatory, please visit our website, nuffieldfgo.org.uk. You can also sign up to receive our regular bulletins, which contain information about our latest research and upcoming events. Go to nuffieldfgo.org.uk. We would be really grateful if you could fill in our event feedback form, because we learn a lot from those. But most of all, we look forward to welcoming you to future events. Thank you all very much.